Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know there are only 3 types of mountains in the world? Climb with us to the top of Fold, Fault Block, and Dome Mountains to learn how ice, minerals, crops, and forests designed the logo for International Mountain Day and represent the impact mountains have on our lives.
You know, every time you look at a mountain, you're really looking at a kind of geological time capsule. It's this single moment in history that took millions, literally millions of years to unfold.
And it's just standing there, immovable, majestic.
Exactly. We see those craggy peaks, and you just marvel at the raw power it must have taken to push the Earth's crust up toward the heavens like that.
It's almost unimaginable. And our mission today is pretty straightforward.
Yep. We're going to give you the fast track to really understanding the critical global role that mountains play, how they were formed, and their profound cultural significance. We're cutting straight through the noise, relying entirely on the material you sent us.
Right, and to set the stage for this deep dive, that first statistic is, well, it's the perfect place to start.
It really is. Let's just nail down the scale immediately. Mountains cover about 1/4 of the Earth's land surface.
27%.
27% of all the ground we walk on. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with why this 27% is so absolutely vital to the other 73% of the planet.
What's fascinating here, and the sources make this crystal clear, is the sheer magnitude of global well-being that relies on that relatively small piece of land.
Right.
And it's something the international community recognizes. That's why we have International Mountain Day celebrated every year. It's a global effort to raise awareness about their impact on our quality of life.
But the sources seem to zoom in on one specific role, one key insight.
They do. It's the reason mountains are so often called nature's water towers.
That's such a great phrase. It's immediate, it's clear.
Yeah.
But how does that mechanism actually work? Is it just, they're tall so they catch the rain?
It's a bit more elegant than that. It's a spectacular global weather machine, really. You have warm, moist air from the lower elevations.
Okay.
And it rises along the mountain slopes. As it goes up, it cools down very rapidly. That causes the moisture to condense into clouds.
And then you get rain. Or snow.
Or, more importantly, snow and ice. The mountain acts as a colossal storage tank. It holds onto that water as snowpack and glaciers.
So it's not just making the rain, it's saving it for later.
Exactly. And then, during the warmer, drier months, that water is slowly released through melting. That's what feeds the rivers and aquifers, sometimes thousands of miles away.
So it's this incredible energy exchange. It's taking the planet's humidity and turning it into localized, stored fresh water that's regulated all year round.
You've got it. Which brings us to a statistic in the sources that is just staggering.
I know the one you mean.
Mountains provide between 60 to 80% of the world's fresh water.
Let's just repeat that. Up to 80%. The vast majority of our clean, usable water is dependent on these systems.
It's truly eye-opening.
Wait, if they're the source of up to 80% of our fresh water, how secure is that system? I mean, with warming global temperatures, are these water towers getting less reliable?
That's a huge question, and the sources really underscore this vulnerability by highlighting the immense human dependency.
How many people are we talking about?
Half of the world's entire population, half. They rely on mountains not just for that water, but for energy, for clean air, for food production, and this is crucial, for flood control downstream.
The true insight here seems to be this colossal resource inequality. 80% of our critical water supply is held in these systems that are home to only about 15% of the global population.
That's it. That tiny fraction of land holds the key to global stability.
Which makes their conservation an urgent, truly global priority.
Absolutely. The water that falls on, say, the Andes or the Rockies isn't just for the people living on the peaks. It sustains massive populations and entire economies far, far away. It's a resource we all share and have to protect.
And to give you a clearer visual of this resource role, the source material actually dissects the International Mountain Day logo. It's kind of like a little cheat sheet that summarizes everything a mountain provides.
Oh, I loved that part. It's a wonderful distillation of these complex facts into, simple symbols.
It is. So the logo is made of 3 triangles that form the mountain. The first one has a rhombus shape at the very top. That signifies the ice and snow.
The water tower part.
The water tower part, exactly. The stored water. Then the second triangle has an orange circle inside it. That's meant to indicate the minerals and essential resources hidden deep inside the mountain.
Okay, so water and raw materials.
Right. And finally, the third triangle has a smaller green triangle inside, symbolizing the forests, the biomass, the crops that all thrive on the slopes.
Water, material wealth, and living ecosystems. It's the whole package, right there in one image.
And the sources also highlight a theme that's still so relevant today, but it was originally focused on back in 2019. Mountains matter for youth. It really stresses this profound idea that young people are the ultimate custodians of these natural resources. It's called to stewardship, really. It says the youth, globally, have to act responsibly to raise awareness about the vital role mountains play. It shifts the whole conversation from just, appreciation to necessary action.
And to fully appreciate what we need to act on, we have to understand the sheer effort required to create them in the first place. This takes us from the why they matter to the how they were made.
A story that unfolds across millions and millions of years.
Colossal slow-motion geologic forces, absolutely. The foundational concept is that most mountains were formed below the ground when the Earth's tectonic plates, these immense slabs of crust, came together.
So they crash into each other.
Sometimes crash, sometimes grind, sometimes slide. But that geologic activity forces huge slabs of rock upward. And the sources outline 3 distinct ways this happens, which gives us our 3 main mountain types.
And the name of each type basically tells you how it was formed.
Exactly. So first, you have the fold mountain. Now, imagine the Earth's crust as a massive cosmic rug.
Okay, I'm with you.
Fold mountains happen when 2 tectonic plates collide in a slow, unimaginable head-on crash. And just like pushing a rug from both ends, the rock layers wrinkle, they crumple, and they buckle upward.
So it's a fold.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the classic example given is the Himalayas, which of course gives us the tallest peak in the world, Mount Everest.
A crumple on a scale that's just impossible to really comprehend.
It is. Then the second type is the fault block mountain. This one doesn't happen from a head-on collision, but from grinding pressure. 2 plates are sliding past each other.
Like they're scraping against each other.
Right. And that immense pressure causes a sharp break-a-fault. This leads to one massive block of rock lifting up and tilting sharply over the other. The example from the sources is the Sierra Nevada range in California,
Which is known for those really steep, dramatic faces. So that's the tilt.
That's the tilt. So we have the slow crunch that folds them, the grinding that faults them, and then we have the third type, which involves that superheated, melted rock from the Earth's core. Magma. This brings us to the dome, or volcanic mountain. This formation happens through a process called subduction.
Subduction, that's where one plate is literally pushed below the other one.
Exactly. And that friction and pressure melts the rock, forcing magma up toward the surface. It then cools and solidifies, forming a hardened dome of rock.
And the sources mention that this activity happens mostly below the surface, right? That's what creates that distinctive dome shape.
That's a critical point, and the prime example given is, of course, Mount Fuji in Japan.
It's amazing. A crumple, a tilt, and a dome. 3 basic plate interactions account for every major mountain range we see. And it's on those massive geological stress points that you get some of the richest and most specialized zones for life on the whole planet.
Indeed. The varied elevations and the different climates create these unique ecological niches, and that fosters incredible biodiversity.
Let's talk mountain life for a second. Our sources mention some of the spectacular animals found in the mountain ranges of, say, Canada and the United States. Magnificent grazers like antelope, bighorn sheep, mountain goats.
All perfectly adapted for that terrain.
Totally. And of course, the predators that keep that system in balance. Mountain lions and several types of bears, specifically black, brown, and grizzly bears. Right.
I have to say, I'm sure the black bears are great, but if I'm taking a hike, I think I'll stick to the fold mountains of the Himalayas. I'm much more likely to run into a friendly Sherpa than a grizzly bear.
Probably a wise tactical choice. And beyond the wildlife, the sources do emphasize that mountains are hugely popular destinations for tourism and important cultural trails. They draw people for both recreation and inspiration.
Absolutely. And I liked that the sources gave some concrete, actionable ideas for how you, the listener, can engage with mountains no matter how close you live to a peak.
What were some of those?
Well, they suggest organizing a youth group to teach them about the value of mountains, or just taking a group of friends on a hike, which is maybe the most direct way to appreciate them.
Sure.
But I love this next idea because it links right back to the geology. They encourage you to take pictures of mountains in your area and then take the time to learn their type. Is it a fold, a fault block, or a dome mountain.
Oh, that's great. It connects that colossal geological knowledge right to your local landscape.
It really does. And that connection to the land naturally leads us into the final dimension that the sources captured, the cultural and spiritual resonance mountains hold. As these massive, enduring features, they really transcend mere geography to become these profound symbols of human aspiration.
Right, and we were given a very specific source for this, a hymn titled High on the Mountaintop.
Yes, and we have to be impartial here and just report on the key themes and imagery that are present in those lyrics.
So what are the central ideas? What are the promises being made in this text?
The imagery is very striking. It speaks of a banner being unfurled on the mountaintop, waving to all the world. So it establishes the mountain as a central point of universal visibility.
A place where important global announcements are made, so to speak.
You could say that. The lyrics mention a promise that truth's standard would unfold on a place called Zion's Hill, attracting the gaze of the world. This idea of the mountain as a center for revelation and global attention is a powerful spiritual theme you see across many different traditions.
And it goes further than that, right?
It does. The text describes God's house being built there to display his glory. And there's this concept that people from distant lands would be drawn to it, saying things like, "We'll now go up and serve the Lord, obey his truth, and learn his word."
So the mountain functions as a destination for learning and governance, a place where fundamental laws and truths are taught to a global audience.
That's the interpretation that the source material itself provides. It states that there, the people will be taught the governing laws, which it describes as being packed with universal truth and wisdom. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that mountains aren't just geological features that provide 80% of our fresh water. They are profound, universal symbols of aspiration, promise, and responsibility. They serve as physical places where diverse human cultures gather, learn, serve, and seek wisdom.
We have covered the full spectrum here. We started with the sheer scale mountains, covering that 27% of the land, and we established their function as nature's water towers.
Supplying the vast majority of our fresh water.
Then we dove into those three distinct slow-motion formation methods. The slow, buckling crumple of a fold mountain.
The grinding tilt of a fault block.
And the underground eruption that creates a dome. We then finished by appreciating them as these dynamic habitats and crucial cultural symbols.
It's a lot to hold in your head at once.
It is, but it means the next time you look at a mountain, you're seeing millions of years of tectonic activity, a critical natural water system, and a potent cultural symbol, all wrapped into one immovable feature.
A really powerful thought.
And before we go,
Yeah.
we want to leave you with the questions posed right there in the source material to encourage you to keep this curiosity going. Think about this. How do mountains bless your life? And what can you do today and every day to help raise awareness of mountains?
Great questions to ponder.
Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the home school for faith and family.